Hello everyone, my name is Mohammed Taha Talu and I will talk about John Stuart Mill and in particular with the first chapter of the Subjection of Woman. This is my first English video and I hope that it'll go well. So shall we begin? Okay. This video will be based on two assignments I submitted to my teacher. So the essay is called On John Stuart Mill and the Subjection of Woman, which is very obvious. Let's begin with the short life story of John Stuart Mill. Mill's writing is especially more of the analytic nature than of, the poetic sort of prose other contemporaries preferred. But in order to understand the Victorian era, one must read Mill beforehand in order to understand Matthew Arnold, Algernon Charles Swinburne and Thomas Hardy, because he affected them very much. John Stuart Mill's father was an intellectual man and his son was homeschooled to a great success, since at the age of 4 he could read in Latin and Greek and discuss highly sophisticated matters for hours. At the age of 14 he was equipped with enough intellectual capital to start his career, as he stated in his autobiography, almost a decade earlier than his contemporaries. For many years, Mill served in the East Indian Company, which would be nationalized in the midst of the 19th century. Since his father and the most adults around him were utilitarians, he also dedicated himself to the cause, and he updated it, and he also incorporated the values of anti-utilitarians like Thomas Carlyle or Samuel Taylor Coleridge. His romantic life was a bit irregular, since he fell in love with a prominent feminist who was married, but everything went well and they married after the death of Harriet Taylor's husband. Taylor is important, but we will talk later about her. Mill published his long essay The Subjection of Woman in 1869. His sort of rational argumentation resembled the Greek apologetics, such as Justinus. The female question was not the only thing on his agenda. Mill sincerely believed in democracy and struggled against the subjection of the individual, not only women. In this treatise, not only attacking kings or dictators, but he highlighted the dangers of tyrannical majorities. So he was sort of critically towards democracy. I won't read it out loud. He foresaw that majority didn't mean that people were right or everything would come out all right in the end, but there could be a thing as oppressive majorities, and those could turn people into conformists. Mill he was always concerned with the interests of the individual, and he believed in the interests of a single person rather than the mass. As we should continue to the subjection of women, of which I analyzed the first chapter. In easy read, I would suggest it to everyone, especially modern feminists, who are just women that don't get laid and are pissing other people off and smell. So I hope people would be feminists like John Stuart Mill or his wife Harriet Taylor, who came up with actual arguments which were products of long rational processes, instead of agitating all over the world and achieving nothing. So the the writing part of the essay was finished in the 60s, but Mill published it 9 years later. Um, Mill's arguments after a short mukaddime, we say in Turkish, after a short prologue starts with Mill saying that men must deliver evidence that women are inferior and not the other way around, because he gives the example that if someone accuses another person of murder, not the unguilty party must prove his or her innocent. Rather, the accusing party must deliver proof. And quote, if a person is charged, I just said that. His next argument is that women were not given the chance to govern or other opportunities except for the fictional Amazons. So, as you know, referring to the classics is always a thing and has been until this day. So he uses this technique of referring to the antiques and says that Plato was very fond of the Spartans, especially when talking about their women, that they were free and the society worked. They didn't collapse. So to be precise, he says, among many other of his doctrines, that the social and political equality of two sexes. He also criticized the church on historical accounts because throughout history it had used its powers against kings, against all sort of classes of society, but never to do any real good in modern terms, I say. But I don't support this argument of his, because the church, especially until the early modern times, they fed the poor, and much writing was done. They multiplied books, and most importantly, they delivered the classics to us, which were also the foundation of the Renaissance. And later on, you can see that still after so many years, in the 1860s, a guy like Mill quotes them. Which another quote of his is when he says that nobody in Dominion has ever asked whether their domination is legitimate. So you have to ask the questions. I mean, are you in the right to bully me around, to tyrannize me? Yeah, the exact quote is, but was there any domination which did not appear until which did not appear natural to those who possessed it? Uh, Let me just switch to the next page. Yeah, many women in that era willingly accepted their inferior state in society, and that was the argument. He says, yet one can see in many women, especially literate women, that they are not content with their stance and in their writings they are protesting against it. One could take his wife Harriet Taylor for an example. I believe that she very much did influence him. So, and another one of his arguments, among my favorites, is when he says that humanity has progressed really far, and we're talking about the steam engine age he lives in. I mean, photography is invented or is about to be invented. Railroads reach everywhere. A trip from Istanbul to Marseille, which was 6 week long, took only 6 days at that age. So the idea of progress and prosperity and a better world um, encouraged him to produce this argument. And he ridicules men trying to understand women without a dialogue with them, and he finds it especially absurd that those men who don't confer with women should make laws about them, which is still the case in many countries of the world. They take the liberty to talk about abortion, but only maybe like 10% of the parliament seats belong to women. His final argument is that men prevent women from any kind of endeavor or career. They are forced into submission and have no other choice. And my personal thoughts, well, this was the summary part, and now comes the part where I talk about my personal thoughts about the essay, what it invoked in me. So I thought when I first saw, okay, subjection of women, this would be a conservative text, and he would push women into houses, and like he would confirm with the current situation in the Victorian era, but he did not so. His use of historical facts that especially interests me, since I myself am a pretty amateurically into history. So the criticism of church I found amusing, because it was not I mean, people couldn't really argue against that because he made valid points. So moving on, as it is known, slavery was banished around the midst of the 19th century, and should I give an extra info? No, I shouldn't, it's not really relevant. As a pioneer in modern and liberal thought, addresses the problem of the enslavement of black people with an indirect approach. That's Mill. The equivalent of enslavement or subjection of women is the enslavement of black people. For each time their enslavement is mentioned when talking about unjust done to women. So slavery has just been abolished in the 19th century, and he says, look, we've done a great thing, and it's really close. I mean, it has not been a long time since we've done this great deed, and why shouldn't we enhance this beauty of humanity and emancipate women? And his arguments aren't restricted only to historical arguments, which should be a fact to address for me, but one of the again striking arguments was that, I quote, less than 40 years ago, Englishmen might still by law hold human beings in bondage as saleable property. So he slams the fact that humanity hasn't been humane 40 years ago, so we shouldn't brag about what we've accomplished, and we should always be aware of our past, of the fuck-ups we did, and we shouldn't screw what we've achieved. Okay, so he crushes all the legal grounds on which sexists appear to have stood on their endeavor to domesticate women. And another witty argument is when Mills says, if a person, I just talked about that. This was a bit repetitive, so I just skip a few pages. So, and I believe I should conclude this video with what Millicent Garrett Fawcett says in his introduction part to 3 of his essays, that his arguments were repeatedly studied until perfection. And you can see it because the essay was finished in 1960 and was published 9 years later, so that means 9 years of redaction, and it was repeatedly corrected and examined, and then when it was published, it could attract a 21-year-old who lives in Turkey like me to write an elaborate essay about it. Okay, to conclude this video, we could say that they are fine pieces of mind supported with historical evidence, not too sophisticated, so as to be comprehended by the layman reader. One can only thank Mill for his endeavor in liberating women in such conservative times, even maybe risking getting marginalized. So I am Mohammed Tahatalu, and this is my first video on an English subject, an English writer, an English essay. So I hope you're not too critical, and I should also say that I haven't slept tonight, so I might be a bit weird. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please give me feedback on what I should improve and what I have done well. The latter one you should talk about more because I'm a bit of an egocentric person. So thank you for watching. I would be pleased if you subscribed and liked and shared and commented on the video. So again, thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay home unless you don't have to go out.